Hey, welcome back. Thanks for popping in and a big sloppy kiss for all my subscribers. Damn, just lost another bunch. Actually, I understand full well that my direction here is bound to annoy people rather than attract them. And as I'm trying to show the faults with the methods many people use to come to their views, I expect most people to not want to watch. But this is exactly why I'm doing it. If you're not interested in seeing problems with your views, then you're not interested in truth. If you're not interested in truth, well, I would guess you fit quite well in with the majority of the world, which is why we're here. But let's see this in action. As is common for me, I'm not taking sides here. I'm not commenting on Joe Rogan, aside from saying that I loved how he used to make jokes about Mike Goldberg whenever he said something stupid. I'm not a virologist, nor medical expert, and as such will not comment on the virus nor expert opinion. I haven't seen many of Vaush, whoever. Let's go with Vaush's videos. I think this is the third. As usual, let's look simply at what is said, and, as in most cases, how utterly ridiculous it is. Finally, a warning. This is exactly the kind of video that makes me angry. This is teaching ignorance. Literally, this is how you teach someone to be most often wrong. I don't care what this or that person believes, but when you are spreading your obviously flawed methods, you are hurting all those who listen to you. Vaush here may be correct about his conclusion, I don't know. And I'm not going to speak about his conclusions. But his methods are horrendous. He isn't only sharing his conclusion. His viewers also learn his ridiculous methods, his garbage heap version of epistemology. This is what really gets under my mask. Having no idea how to come to truth and sharing your ignorance with countless others. So you've been warned. This kind of thing puts sand in my crack like Sex on the Beach. Minus the great parts of Sex on the Beach.
If you ever hear that phrase, by the way, that is okay. So one of the things that political so this is an element of propaganda. Okay, one of the things that ideologically driven people will do is they will attempt to affect an aesthetic of neutrality by giving air to the experts on the other side when they're like the 1 in 1,000.
And away we go. You don't seem to understand propaganda. This is giving information which is used to promote or publicize a particular point of view. So long as Joe is talking to people on both sides of an issue and treating them both similarly, he is not promoting a particular point of view. You, on the other hand, as we will see, seem to promote a single ideology. Therefore, you are actually the one pushing propaganda. You may be interested in knowing that this is commonly called projecting. This is where one accuses another of their own failings. As for neutrality, this is the position where one learns most easily. Having your conclusion pre-made prior to hearing all sides of a disagreement, as you have obviously done in this video, is called bias. As for your comment about 1 in 1,000, you should know that this is an argument from popularity, also known as argumentatum ad populum. This is fallacious. If you are aware of this, stop doing it. If you aren't aware of this, stop making videos until you learn more. Did you know that most people in the world aren't gingers? Did you know that most gingers neither have nor constantly stroke their beards? Therefore you shouldn't. Do you see how the number of gingers, the amount who have beards, nor the amount who continuously stroke them, is relevant at all to whether you should or shouldn't stroke your beard? Probably not. Look, if you didn't like the joke, Galileo on April 12th, 1633, a mere 400 years ago, began his trial for heresy for the position of the Earth moving around the sun. About 16 years prior to that, he had found himself in hot water for disagreeing that the Earth was the fixed center of the universe. Just to drive home the point, as it may be required, most people in the world, an astonishingly high number, held the opposing view to Galileo. He was in a huge minority, perhaps a minority of one, and yet he was right. Now, I'm not saying that any of the experts that were on Joe's show are equivalent to Galileo. I'm merely pointing out the fallacy of appeal to popularity. Galileo is an example of the majority being wrong. It doesn't matter how many people hold a view. The number of people holding a view in no way speaks to the truthfulness of that view. If Trump supporters outnumber liberal supporters, does that mean that Trump is the best president? Of course not. Finally here, you mentioned that ideologues attempt to affect an aesthetic of neutrality by giving air to experts who disagree with them. I'm not so sure this is true. I would think that an ideologue would want to only air their side of the argument and attack those on the other side. I would expect that to be more common. You know, like what you're doing right now. But look, as I'm not an ideologue, I guess I'll have to take an ideologue's word on what they do.
Where people encouraged to teach the controversy with creationism versus evolution.
Creationism versus evolution is not analogous here. Neither is flat versus globe Earth, nor VHS versus Betamax. Yeah, sorry. Old. These, while controversial in some areas or times, are settled items. We have mountains of evidence for evolution, as well as globe Earth. VHS 1, for better or worse. The fact that some do not yet hold these views does not make them analogous to other controversies for which we do not yet have a solid conclusion. When new scientific problems arise, we want to have differing ideas from experts to work out the specifics of the problem. Basically, what should be done about the sea plague, which people disagree about, is not analogous to a few irrational beliefs about evidenced, logically settled claims. This is a false analogy. False analogies used in arguments, as you are doing here, are fallacious. You are hurting people.
And the idea that Joe Rogan just wants to hear them out is a bad one. Joe Rogan doesn't have any expertise, to my knowledge, in basically anything outside of steroid use.
I'll skip over the steroid comment, cheap and accurate as it is. But you may be surprised to find that you, me, and most people in the world have probably taken steroids before. They can be found in a great many medicines. You should also be aware that there are different kinds of steroids. Let's focus instead on your ignorance. No, that's not really what I wanted to say. Let me try again. Let's instead focus on the willful ignorance that you spread. No, not quite. You're making people dumber. Yeah, that's the one. The idea that Joe Rogan, who, for the sake of argument, let's say might be wholly ignorant on every subject, wants to hear from differing medical experts on important medical topics is a bad idea. Yeah, let's zoom in there a bit. How the hell do you expect people to learn, progress, improve? Look, this is not complicated. One cannot know if they are wrong until they have learned that they were wrong. You, for example, seem to think that it is acceptable to continuously play with your beard. Others may disagree and see it as creepy AF. I'll take the position of being unsure if it's acceptable or creepy. You are suggesting you do not want to hear arguments from cultural experts who call it creepy, simply because more experts say it is acceptable. You're an ostrich putting its head in the sand. Acceptable, acceptable, acceptable. There are a great many similarly misguided people who would call it creepy and not want to hear the experts who disagree with them. Creepy, creepy. I, on the other hand, would like to hear the experts disagree so I can come to a more nuanced, informed opinion. I would further like to hear any new information that adds to or contradicts the old information. But it's your head. You keep it in the sand if you like. If you are able to think critically, burst out of your bias bubble for a moment, and learn about all the fallacies that constantly drop from your mouth like eggs from a cockroach, you may learn to better discern the truth. Look, I understand it's easier for you to believe what you already do. Sure makes life easy. But not everyone is interested in believing they are correct. Some of us are interested in what is actually correct, not just the cozy feelings generated by groupthink in particular tribes. Hearing different ideas and concepts is how we advance our own understanding and or come to higher or lower confidence levels.
He deliberately chose the minority position, the overwhelming minority position on the current global pandemic in order to air unchallenged their perspectives to like 20 million people.
Yes, I suppose he did. Thanks, Joe. I really wish there were people doing that in Galileo's time. Perhaps he wouldn't have gone through what he did. And perhaps we would be more advanced by now. I would remind you of the appeal to popularity fallacy that you mentioned earlier, and we're back to now. Joe aired both views, the majority and minority, to 20 million people. He wants to find the truth. I realize you think you have it already. So did the church in the time of Galileo. Different fallacy, equally ignorant.
Notice how what I just said is what happened, but the way that he phrased it made it sound like it was just some kind of, neutral interest in, curiosity in what they have to say.
Hey, congratulations! You've discovered what narrative means. The way you framed it was the way you want people to see it. The way he framed it is the way he wants people to see it. The way I see it is someone who claims interest in finding the truth is being beaten down with fallacies by an ideologue. Now, we could discuss who might be correct if you like, but I expect you would call that misinformation or something.
8 months ago, if you said, if you get vaccinated, you can still catch COVID and you can still spread COVID, you would be removed from social media.
That is not true. That was a fact. So this is a lie.
You are doing exactly what the left and the right always do. It's childish. And sorry to keep coming back here, but ignorant. First, you may be correct. A lie is defined as to speak falsely or utter untruth knowingly, as with intent to deceive. Therefore, in order to actually be correct, you would have to show that he knowingly said an untrue sentence. Can you provide evidence that he is intentionally trying to deceive? Or is it possible that he is exaggerating? I would suggest he may have been being hyperbolic. You may be interested in the concept of charitable listening, where you attempt to take the other person's view in the best possible light. Or, as is evidenced here, you probably aren't that interested. At any rate, one should not be hyperbolic in an argument. Hyperbole is not going to help you win an argument. Quite the opposite. Of note, as you say at the end of your video, some people have been kicked off of some social media platforms for things like this. At best, he's overstating his point. Not useful. But to say he is lying, well, you still have work to do there. Even given that I agree he spoke falsely, this is not the same as lying. And if after doing that work you cannot show that he was knowingly and intentionally speaking falsely, well, sorry to burst your bubble, but that may mean that you are in fact lying when you say he is.
The fact that people's information changes means that there's no such thing as misinformation is an incredibly telling philosophy in the world.
Joe did not say the fact that information changes means there's no misinformation. You've misquoted him. He said, the problem I have with the term misinformation is that many of the things we thought of as misinformation just a short while ago are now considered as fact. In case you can't see the difference here, I'll try to help. Misinformation is defined as false or inaccurate information, especially that which is deliberately intended to deceive. If your misquoted line were true, it would mean that Joe is saying there's no such thing as false or inaccurate information. This is absurd. Joe surely believes he's not 20 feet tall. He surely believes he has a podcast and has learned some martial arts. So, according to you, if I said he were 20 feet tall, doesn't have a podcast, and has never studied martial arts, he would have to say that these claims are not false or inaccurate. I highly doubt he would say that. What he did say is that the term misinformation is problematic because information changes. Let's go back to Galileo, or literally any other discovery or theory which we now hold as true, gravity, the model of the atom, tectonic plates, and on and on and on. Before those discoveries were made, people held other views. At that time, these new views could have accurately been labeled as misinformation, as they didn't conform to the current understanding of that time. However, now that we do hold these new views as correct, it is the old views which would be accurately termed misinformation. This seems to be what Joe is trying to describe, perhaps poorly. This is not the same as saying there's no such thing as misinformation. Those old ideas that we have since improved upon are examples of misinformation, as is saying Joe is 20 feet tall. April 1633, Galileo's ideas could accurately be called misinformation. Today, the geocentric model, the one that was most common in 1632, is accurately called misinformation, using the same word, misinformation, which means false or inaccurate information, for both of two opposing views, regardless of time, illustrates a fundamental misunderstanding of truth and logic. Identity, non-contradiction, excluded middle. That does not mean that nothing is false. It means that this is a bad use of the term. Science moves forward. It does not make truth claims. Rather, it shows things false, and in so doing, inches closer to truth. You're saying the majority of experts presently are correct. This is not how science works. Learn about science. Your bias here is obstructing the obvious. That's one problem with being an ideologue.
The issue is, and this is a part of the dishonesty, and again, Shu, I ask you, is this not an ideologue's position? Plenty of people speculated that it may have come from a lab and weren't banned off social media.
First, no, that is not an ideologue's position. Why is it that I always have to look up definitions for people? Do you not have a dictionary? If you're going to use words, you may be interested in what it is that you're saying. Apparently not. An ideologue is defined as an adherent to an ideology, especially one who is uncompromising and dogmatic. So I ask you, which ideology is Joe adhering to? He has brought on experts on differing sides of this issue. I have just as much ability to say as he is on one side as you have to say he is on the other. Or we could try something wonderful, useful, and not so childish. We could ask him. Yes, plenty of people have speculated about the lab leak idea. Yes, many of them have not been kicked off of social media. Are you seriously claiming that because some people have said it and not been kicked off some platforms, that no one has been kicked off platforms for saying the same? Black swan fallacy, Tiger. Just because all swans you have seen are white does not mean all swans are white. Some people have in fact been banned on some platforms for saying extremely similar things. I would suggest looking for such people prior to making the claim that it didn't happen, as opposed to getting all the way through your drivel and then making corrections at the end. But this is your mess. You arrange it however you like.
People who play victim over this type of thing, the whole like, oh, people used to get banned for this, but now they're not because they know it's truth. Well, most of the people who did get banned were just straight up lying, and their positions were just kind of tangential to the truth, you know? Like, you can say something that's true and still, like, be spreading misinformation.
Perhaps you should have been an author. You have some talent at spinning narratives. Joe is not playing the victim here. He is defending himself. People may defend themselves at 2 different times. 1, they were attacked. 2, they were not attacked. If one were not attacked, and yet still defended themselves, we could certainly say that this person was playing the victim. Of course, if they were attacked, then we could not say this. Now, are you or are you not attacking him? And did others attack him or not? Pull your skirt down, Vaush. Your biases are showing. Also, what the hell did you just say? You can say something that is true and still be spreading misinformation? I will have to define misinformation for you again. You seem to have a misunderstanding of the word, or perhaps are using a different definition. Misinformation is false or inaccurate information, especially that which is deliberately intended to deceive. I'm not sure how one could say something which is true and still be spreading misinformation. However, I would love to learn how this is possible. If you say something that is true and something that is false, then the true thing is not misinformation. The false thing is misinformation. Identity, non-contradiction, and excluded middle. Open a book.
But you are a person who has biases and who chose to bring them up. So he's essentially admitting he can't even check them. So by his own admission, this is literally just asking questions.
Everyone has biases. Joe is trying to get information from as many expert sources as he can before making his conclusion. You also have biases, as do I. The difference here is that Joe is challenging his, while you are a slave to yours. The only way to minimize our biases is to honestly and openly listen to differing points of view. Joe is doing that. Want to guess who isn't? I really don't understand what some people's problems with asking questions is. Let me make this super clear. Asking questions is the easiest way we discard incorrect, irrational beliefs and replace them with correct, more rational ones. Believing that we are correct and not asking questions is willful ignorance. Let me word down a bit for you, V-Guy. You are choosing to be uneducated and spreading it around. I'm not saying anything about your conclusion, sir. I'm talking about your methods. Personally, I really don't care if you're ignorant. What bothers me is that you're spreading your ignorance, biases, and ideology onto others. Leading people away from education is, in my opinion, highly immoral. The people we should listen to are the ones that tell you to ask questions. People like yourself, however, who don't want others to question authority or consensus, well, we have lots of names and groups for people like that. Authoritarian? Totalitarian? The religious? I suppose I could list some historical groups by name, but I certainly don't want to step on Whoopi's toes. Shine on, you crazy diamond.
Didn't he just say he doesn't know if they're right because he doesn't have the expertise to figure it out? Didn't he just say that? How are you figuring out what's correct? You know? Like you clearly don't have a method for ascertaining.
Hey, Vaush, thanks! A great question. Let me throw it back at you. How do you know you're correct about anything? Well, I hope you would take a look at all the evidence, all the arguments, and then come to a tentative conclusion, which remains open to new or different evidence. But it's obvious that you don't do that, which is why I use the term willful ignorance. You may very well do that in many parts of your life, but here you are literally arguing for the opposite. Joe has a big following and therefore shouldn't allow experts to give their ideas on subjects you disagree with. How does Joe know if they're right? He doesn't. He wants to hear all the evidence, but V-Man, how do you know you're right? You don't. In fact, you aren't. Even if your conclusion is correct, your method is crap. Perhaps you're into truth by chance, but I'd rather use good methods to reduce the amount of false things that I believe. I'm going to believe what most experts say, and I don't want myself or anyone to hear anything different. You're using fallacious reasoning, appeal to popularity, and saying that others should also not hear this information. Burn any good books today. Willful ignorance. You say he doesn't have a method for ascertaining. Actually, it is yourself who has an unreliable, immature, ideological method, which, although common, is not a method to find truth at all.
I don't think there's any honor or any legitimacy in just pulling positions from all over the aisle.
I'm not sure why we're talking about honor. However, you should probably be made aware that honor has several definitions, one of which is adherence to what is right, or to a conventional standard of conduct. You're dead wrong. It is very honorable to hear all sides of a conflict before coming to a conclusion. Legitimacy. Dead wrong again. I think someone should buy you a dictionary for your birthday. Legitimacy means ability to be defended with logic or justification. Validity. Joe is not getting the opinions of just any random person. He is having conversations with experts in the field. You are mischaracterizing him and what he does to suit your narrative. This is precisely what seemingly everyone in the mainstream media does. Congratulations?
Let's have one normal person and one neo-Nazi. Let's have one person who let's just have a creationist on, huh?
False analogy fallacy. You really need to learn these. Let me see if I can help. You're attempting to compare two groups. You're attempting to show they are similar in some important ways. You are pointing to disagreements and suggesting that because Joe talks to people on both sides of the issue of the sea plague, that this is similar to him talking to a neo-Nazi or a creationist. You are correct in that both sides of these issues are in disagreement. Unfortunately, however, your analogy falls short because of evidence. In the case of the sea plague, there is evidence. Joe is speaking to experts who use statistics, facts, and their personal experience in the field to come to a better understanding of the truth. In the case of neo-Nazis, we don't have an expert. And we don't have someone using stats or facts. What we have instead is a person who is expressing their own opinions via their biases and ideology. Reminds me of someone. In the case of the creationist, we have someone who is denying the findings of science and is unable to produce a reasonable model at all. If you want an analogy that doesn't fail horribly, perhaps try the conflict about the best way to ensure everyone has clean drinking water, or perhaps the conflict between those disagreeing about how best to deal with climate change. But I'm willing to guess that you already know the answers to those questions and do not want to hear any dissenting opinions. Just a guess.
The choice to choose some types of, fringe beliefs held by people of ill repute is indicative of the positions that you hold. Namely, the obvious bias that you have against people with just standard accepted views on COVID.
I'm not sure why we're referring to the experts that Joe had on his show as people of ill repute. You should be... Oh hell, you likely aren't. An ad hominem fallacy is where you attack the person making the argument instead of the argument itself. And, while I'm on the topic, poisoning the well is another fallacy where one preemptively gives adverse information in an attempt to ridicule or discredit something a person will say. I would guess you don't much care. Where were we? Ah, yes, fringe beliefs. People of ill repute. Galileo. Actually, every single advancement that has ever been made in every subject or area. You are painfully and obviously mistaken. If no one had ever gone against, what was your gibberish? People with standard accepted views. Then we would have never made any of those advancements. All advancements ever made went against the standard accepted views. To be clear, lots of these fringe belief people of ill repute have been wrong as well. But the only way we find out if these new ideas are closer to truth or not is by first hearing them. It is hoped, although I know it is not the case, that once we have had the debate, be it between clean drinking water or creationism, that people will move away from the more irrational position. Like and subscribe, V-Man. That is what we try to do around here. But just as you are against hearing positions which disagree with your opinions and the fallacies that you use, creationists also aren't interested in learning and are well known for their fallacies.
The issue is, if you don't have the ability to push back against people you bring on, having one person with controversial positions and one person with regular positions means you are giving equal credence to good and bad positions. Not all positions deserve equal credence. The fact that like 99% of doctors...
We'll cut you there before you repeat the ad populum fallacy again. This is painfully obvious and easy to understand, V-Man. Galileo. Jesus sage. At the time of Galileo, who could push back? He was right. All others were wrong. If there were podcasts back then, who could have talked to Galileo? You are arguing for no one talking to Galileo. You are arguing for ignorance. This is not the same as creationism, for all the reasons I've already explained. I actually agree with you, though. Joe should probably be pushing back against all people who come on his show. I certainly don't know if he does or not. I do, however, remember a Candace Owens interview where he pushed pretty damn hard. I can only hope he does that often. Are you saying he never pushes back? Or that he should push back more? Finally, you've made yet another horrible error. You've stated that Joe is giving equal credence to both the good and bad positions. While you are in fact correct that he is giving equal credence, or at least platform, to both, you have assumed which are the good and bad positions. Friggin' Galileo! I would ask how you came to your conclusion, although I know that your favorite fallacy, appeal to popularity, would pop up again.
This is literally the teach the controversy shit.
No, it is not. First, this notion of teach the controversy isn't a great idea. It suggests, as in your example of creationists, that we should teach each side and let people choose for themselves. The reason this isn't a really good idea is, well, there are lots of people who are seemingly unable to think rationally about some topics, such as yourself on this one, and creationists on that one, and Whoopi on hers. Not all conclusions are equal, as you've pointed out. Unlike the creationists, Joe does not seem to be suggesting both options are possible or should be taught. He has stated in the video that you played that he wants to find the truth. That means come to a conclusion, not let everyone believe whatever they like. If creationists were interested in the truth, they would have to look at the evidence. They don't seem to want to. They seem to prefer to think they are correct because a book says so. That's pretty much exactly like yourself. You don't seem to want to listen to opposing evidence. You seem to prefer to think you are correct because an overwhelming amount of experts say so. Their fallacy is appeal to authority. Yours is appeal to popularity. The problem with teaching the controversy is people just like creationists, which are just like you. What makes the experts correct or incorrect, Vaush, is not how many of them agree to it, but rather the evidence and data they have. This is known as science.
I don't think good ideas and bad ideas should be presented with equal framing. I don't think that they should be presented with equal legitimacy.
I completely agree, but your false analogy is back. I would certainly say that flat Earth and globe Earth should not be presented with equal legitimacy. One has mountains of evidence, the other has none. As we've already talked about your false analogies, though, let's move on. Which side of this controversy is good and which is bad? But I know your answer. Now, the important question. Why do you hold that view? But again, I know your answer. Ad populum fallacy. Fallacies don't mean your conclusion is wrong. They mean you are not justified in your conclusion. Another way to say this is you are being irrational. If you are interested in the flat earthers, although I don't know why anyone would be, they also use some of the exact same fallacies that you do. I'm not saying that you're a flat earther. I'm saying that you are no more inclined to truth than they are.
If you really want to represent the controversial positions, then have the controversial people on alongside a proportional number of less controversial people on for a debate. 99 regular doctors and one grifty doctor, okay? And they can work it out.
Wow. Galilei. Never mind. Are you an atheist, Vaush? Do you think a proportional number of the world's atheists in debate versus a proportional number of theists would be a good idea? How about prior to the sea plague, we had a debate about whether we should prepare for a potential virus between a proportional number of people who were and were not concerned? Should we debate trials by getting a proportional number of jurors who think the defendant is guilty to argue with a proportional number of jurors who think they are innocent? Galileo, you twit! Any person who has ever advanced the human species. In case you are unaware, new ideas are different from old ideas. People who come up with new ideas are always in the minority because they have new ideas. If we had debates in proportion to people's beliefs, we would have lost many of the greatest discoveries of all time. And what would we have gained? Well, we would have kept our belief that constantly stroking our beard is not creepy AF. I would rather try to learn, even knowing that most of these new ideas will be wrong. I want to hear them, so I can see if they do or do not make more sense than my existing ideas. This is a process called learning.
I would just say don't have the controversial view, position on it all.
Yes, Vaush, I know you feel that way. Willful ignorance.
Any platform that makes it its mission to hear out every rejected idea.
Well, I hate to point it out, V-Man, but according to your own version of, let's say, logic, you have just lied. You're implying that Joe Rogan's platform has its mission to hear out every rejected idea. And if you're not implying this, why add it in a video about Joe Rogan? Now, if, by your understanding of lying, from earlier in the video, Joe does not have the mission of hearing out every rejected idea, you would be lying. Just as you said he was lying when he said, saying X on social media will get you kicked off. I would guess he meant it has gotten some people kicked off. I would guess you mean Joe wants to hear many rejected ideas. First, I would point out that you have no clue what a rejected idea even means. You choose what you think is real based on fallacious reasoning. Secondly, I would point out that I would consider making a bet with you about whether Joe will or will not bring on an expert to talk about the truth of, say, the homunculus. This is a rejected idea. Now, I actually know what lying means, so I'm not calling you a liar. I just wanted to point out that you're calling yourself one.
If a person was trying to figure out the best political position and did so by having an equal ratio of fascists and non-fascists on, would you be at all suspicious of that person?
I'm going to have to start getting some kickbacks from Google or these online dictionaries. I need some of that internet money. First, fascism. Fascism is on the far right. Whew, not you, V-Man. It is authoritarian. Sounds exactly like you, V-Dude. Ultranationalism. Safe again. It's characterized by dictatorial power. Uh-oh. Sounds like you again. Forcible suppression of the opposition. Literally what you've been calling for this entire video. And strong regimentation of society. Yup, just like what you're promoting. And the economy. Safe again. I'm just pointing out the similarities here, Vaush. I'm certainly not telling you your political leanings, nor am I calling you a fascist. There's some overlap there, though, Tiger. Now to your question. Yes, that would make me very suspicious. About as suspicious as I am of you due to yet another fallacy. Once again, false analogy. Joe is, as far as I'm aware, talking to people on all sides of the sea plague issue. Your attempt at analogy was the issue of politics, but you centered yours around fascism. Joe is not centering his. Again, all sides. You, however, are centering your discussion of this topic. You're centering yours around controlling information. Did you catch the definition of fascism? You may also want to check out authoritarianism. I would guess someone wanting to find the best political position would be best served by examining all of the existing ones individually, looking at their strengths and weaknesses. However, what often happens next is that said person jumps into one of those tribes. I would suggest more of a buffet style. Pick and choose what you like from any system, and then back up your ideas with rational arguments and examples.
And even thank you to the haters, because it's good to have some haters. It makes...
I appreciate that. Thank you, Joe.
Bias is showing, skirt down. There are people who believe lots of crazy stuff. Have you ever wondered why? Why do they believe the crazy stuff that they do? It's not because they're Gemini, not because they were cursed by fairies or blessed by witches, or however the hell that's supposed to work. And no, they've not come down with some sort of Ecartian mental virus. The reason people believe outrageous things is they use poor methods of coming to those beliefs. For example, some people don't want to hear dissenting opinions. Vaush. Check. Some people use fallacies in their arguments, which can never be relied upon to lead to the truth. Vaush. Check. Some people have strong biases which cloud their judgment. Vaush. Check. There are those who teach these methods to us when we're children or adults, perhaps parents or teachers or preachers, it could be anyone. It is these methods which are causing all of the terrible ideas and indeed actions in our world. I'm not saying you should be angry at your dad because he used to use appeal to authority fallacies on you when you were a kid. I'm saying that Vaush here is some sort of influencer. He's taken the job of giving his opinion to people, informing them on news and events. He does not have the ability to do this job. Much like a fish doesn't have the ability to fly a helicopter. But he certainly isn't alone in this group, and I would never call for anyone to be cancelled. I just want people to see how ridiculous he is and laugh. Laughter at claims such as his is one way we can teach fallacies. Perhaps when we all learn them a bit better, willfully ignorant ideologues like this will join the homunculus and geocentric model in what I would love to mispronounce as the annals of history.